Chidinma, tell me this is a joke. Out of all the men that came for you, you chose a village farmer. A man who carries a hoe every morning. My sister, what exactly did you see in him? I saw a hard-working man. I saw someone who respects me. Is that not enough? Enough? Love will not stop the sun from burning you on the farm. Soon you will be carrying cassava on your head. And when we come to visit you, should we bring our own sleeping mats too? Because I am not sleeping inside one small farmer's hut. Chidinma, you have truly shocked this family. Mock him because his hands are dirty. Mock me because I chose him. But one day, both of you may remember every word you are saying today. Remember it. Why? Because sometimes the person you laugh at today is the person you wish you had never judged tomorrow.
In the beautiful village of Umuagu, where tall palm trees stood proudly on both sides of the red earth roads and wide green farms stretched behind family compounds, lived a respected widow called Mama Orena with her 3 daughters, Nneka, Amarachi, and Chidinma. Umuagu was a peaceful farming community where most people knew each other, where women returned from the stream in the mornings carrying clay pots and buckets on their heads, where farmers could be seen walking toward their farms with hoes and cutlasses before the sun became hot, and where children ran freely around the compounds in the evenings while their mothers prepared dinner over firewood. Mama Orena had lived in the village almost all her life. Her husband had died many years earlier, leaving her to raise their 3 daughters, and although the responsibility had not been easy, she had worked hard to make sure her children grew into responsible women. Her compound was large and neat, surrounded by a low fence made from blocks. There was an old family house at the center, a separate kitchen building at one side, a goat pen behind the kitchen, several banana trees near the back fence, and a very large mango tree that gave shade over the front part of the compound. Mama Orena loved sitting beneath that mango tree in the afternoons. She was a strong woman in her late 50s with a calm voice that could quickly become firm whenever her daughters misbehaved. She usually dressed in beautiful, colorful Ankara print blouses and wrappers with a matching headscarf tied neatly around her head. Of all her children, Nneka was the eldest. Nneka had always been confident, outspoken, and proud. Even as a young girl, she liked being praised more than her sisters, and as she became a woman, her love for attention grew stronger. She had married Chief Obinna, a palm wine and produce merchant from another village. Chief Obinna was the kind of man who loved being noticed whenever he entered a gathering. He dressed in expensive traditional outfits, wore large beads around his neck during important celebrations, and never attended a ceremony quietly. If people were spraying money while women danced, Chief Obinna wanted everyone to see that he had sprayed more than the other men. Whenever he bought something new, whether it was a goat, a new chair for his compound, or even an expensive pair of sandals, Nneka found a way of talking about it. Nneka herself dressed beautifully whenever she came to see her mother. She loved royal blue, orange, and gold Ankara print gowns, matching headscarves, coral beads, and shining earrings. She walked as though the village road belonged to her, and she enjoyed hearing women compliment her clothes. Amarachi, the second daughter, was very similar to Nneka. She was married to Echezona, a trader who operated several stalls at Nkwo Market. Amarachi also loved attention and was always looking for a way to prove that her husband was doing better than everybody else's husband. She preferred beautiful purple, pink, yellow, and green Ankara blouses and wrappers, and often added expensive-looking jewelry whenever she visited Umuagu. Nneka and Amarachi loved each other, but even between them, there was silent competition. If Nneka said Chief Obinna bought 2 goats, Amarachi would quickly say Echezona had bought 3. If Amarachi showed Mama Orena a mule wrapper her husband bought for her, Nneka would immediately mention a more expensive one that Chief Obinna had promised to buy. Mama Orena often watched them with tired amusement. One afternoon, Nneka arrived at her mother's compound carrying a basket. She wore a bright royal blue and orange Ankara gown with a matching headscarf, and heavy coral beads rested around her neck. Mama Orena was seated under the mango tree, sorting vegetables into a woven basket. Chidinma, the youngest daughter, wore a simple but beautiful yellow and turquoise Ankara gown that reached below her knees. Her long braided hair had been pulled gently behind her shoulders, and she had no heavy jewelry on her body. The moment Nneka entered the compound, she raised her voice happily. "Mama, I am here." Mama Orena looked up and smiled. "My daughter, welcome." Nneka walked forward and placed the basket beside her mother. "Chief Obina sent these for you. There is dried fish, palm oil, and some meat inside." Mama Orena nodded with appreciation. "Tell your husband I am grateful. May his hands never lack." Nneka smiled proudly. "He is doing very well, Mama. Business has been moving so much that he hardly even has time to rest." Chidinma glanced at her elder sister and smiled faintly but said nothing. Before long, Amarachi also entered the compound. She wore a purple, pink and cream Ankara blouse with a matching long wrapper and a bright headscarf. "Look at all of you sitting here without me," she said playfully. "Who is discussing me?" "Nobody has the strength to discuss you," Mama Rena answered. Amarachi laughed and hugged her mother. Within minutes, the two older sisters were doing what they did best. Nneka began talking about Chief Obina's latest business plans. Amarachi immediately started talking about the goods Echezona had received at the market. Chidinma quietly continued peeling cocoyam. After some time, Nneka noticed her silence and turned toward her. "Chidinma, why are you pretending not to hear us?" Chidinma looked up. "I can hear you." "Then say something. Your sisters are talking about their husbands and their homes. What will you talk about?" Amarachi laughed. "Ha ha. Leave her. First, she needs a husband before she can join this discussion." Chidinma smiled and shook her head. This was not the first time they had teased her. At 27, Chidinma had already received several marriage proposals, but she had refused them all. Some of the men were traders, one worked for the local government, another came from a wealthy family, but none of them had given her the peace she wanted. One man spoke rudely to his mother in Chidinma's presence, and she refused to see him again. Another bragged constantly about his father's wealth, but never asked Chidinma what she wanted from life. Her sisters could not understand her. They believed she was wasting good opportunities. "Do you know what your problem is?" Nneka asked, crossing one leg over the other. "You think marriage is like going to the market to choose the biggest yam. You keep rejecting men as if better ones will continue coming forever." Chidinma placed another peeled cocoyam inside the bowl. "I do not want the biggest yam. I only want the right one." Amarachi burst into laughter. "Ha ha ha! Listen to her. The right one. Every year you are still waiting for this mysterious right man." Mama Rena raised her face. "Leave your sister alone." "Mama, we are only advising her. She is 27. She should start thinking seriously." Mama Rena frowned. "She is thinking seriously. That is why she is not rushing into somebody's house only because the man has money." Nneka became quiet for a moment. Chidinma looked at her mother gratefully. What her sisters did not know was that something had already changed in her life. For several months, she had been seeing a young man named Ikenna Okafo from the neighboring village of Obuduani. She had first met Ikenna on a market day. Chidinma had gone to buy vegetables and had been returning home when the rope holding one of her baskets had suddenly broken. Tomatoes rolled onto the dusty ground and people passed by while she struggled to gather them. A tall, strong man carrying a hoe had stopped immediately. Without making a joke or trying to impress her, he bent down and helped her pick up everything. He then found a stronger rope from a nearby stall and tied the basket properly. "You should be able to carry it now," he told her. Chidinma thanked him. She expected him to ask her name or try to follow her, but he only smiled and continued walking. A few weeks later, she saw him again near the stream helping an elderly man push a heavy hand cart whose wheel had entered a ditch. Another time, she saw him give a basket of yams to a widow with several children. Slowly, Chidinma became curious about him. She learned that his name was Ikenna and that he was a farmer. When they eventually began talking, Chidinma discovered that he was 33 years old, unmarried and hardworking. Ikenna did not speak like a man trying to impress her. He asked questions about her dreams. He listened when she talked. He respected Mama Orena even before formally meeting her. He never made Chidinma feel small. Even though his hands were rough and his clothes were simple, She felt safer speaking with him than she had felt around many richer men. Over time, they fell in love. On that afternoon beneath the mango tree, Chidinma finally decided to tell her family. She wiped her hands on a small cloth and looked at her sisters. Actually, there is someone. Amarachi stopped laughing. Someone? Nneka's eyes widened. Wait, what do you mean there is someone? Chidinma smiled. I mean I have met someone. Both sisters shifted closer immediately. Who is he? Nneka asked. Where is he from? Amarachi added. What does he do? Chidinma already knew that question would come. His name is Ikenna Okafor. He's from Obodoani. Obodoani? Nneka repeated. I know people from there. Which family? The Okafor family near the eastern farmland. Amarachi nodded slowly. And what does this Ikenna do? Chidinma looked directly at them. He is a farmer. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Nneka stared at Amarachi. Amarachi stared back at her. Suddenly, Nneka burst into loud laughter. She laughed so hard that she bent forward and held her stomach. Amarachi immediately joined her. Chidinma watched them quietly. Mama Orena did not laugh. What is funny? She asked. Nneka tried to speak through her laughter. Mama, did you hear her? After all the men she rejected, Chidinma found a farmer. And what is wrong with being a farmer? Mama Orena asked. Nneka slowly controlled herself. Nothing is wrong with farming, Mama, but we're talking about marriage. Chidinma wants to marry someone who carries a hoe to the bush every morning. Amarachi looked at Chidinma. Is he at least a large-scale farmer? Chidinma shrugged. He works hard. Nneka started laughing again. That means no. You have not even met him, Chidinma said calmly. What exactly should we meet? Amarachi asked. Will meeting him change the fact that he is a farmer? Chidinma's expression hardened slightly. There is nothing shameful about farming. Nobody said it is shameful, Nneka replied, though her smile said otherwise. But you rejected men with businesses. You rejected that teacher from Umunzi. You rejected the man who works in the council office. Now you are bringing somebody who spent his life under the sun. I am marrying a person, not his job. Nneka leaned back dramatically. Soon you will be carrying cassava on your head, Amarachi added, and walking barefoot behind him to the farm. They laughed again. Chidinma felt hurt, but she refused to give them the reaction they wanted. Mama Orena placed the vegetables in her hands aside. Enough! Her voice became firm. The sisters stopped laughing. You two should be careful with your mouths. The fact that your husbands are traders does not make them better than a farmer. The food you eat every day comes from somebody's farm. Nneka rolled her eyes slightly. Mama, we are only worried about her. Then worry with respect, Mama Orena replied. Chidinma looked down. Mama Orena reached over and touched her arm gently. Have you chosen him because you love him? Yes, Mama. Does he respect you? Very much. Does he work? He works harder than anybody I know. Mama Orena nodded. Then bring him. Let us meet him before anybody decides who he is. Chidinma smiled. Thank you, Mama. A few weeks later, Ikenna arrived at Mama Orena's compound with several male relatives to formally introduce himself and make his intentions known. The compound had been swept clean early that morning. Chairs were arranged beneath the mango tree, and the women who came to assist Mama Orena wore beautiful Ankara wrappers in red, green, yellow, purple, and blue patterns. Chidinma looked nervous but happy. She wore a beautiful orange and green Ankara gown with her braids neatly tied behind her head. When Ikenna entered the compound, Nneka studied him from head to toe. He wore a cream traditional shirt with dark brown embroidery, a dark wrapper, and simple leather sandals. He looked neat and confident, but there was no expensive chain around his neck, no flashy watch on his wrist, and no sign that he had come to impress anybody with wealth. Behind him, his relatives carried gifts: large tubers of yam, palm oil, baskets of fruits, vegetables, kola nuts, and drinks. Mama Orena welcomed them warmly. Ikenna greeted her respectfully, bending slightly as he spoke. Mama, thank you for allowing us into your home. You are welcome, my son, Mama Orena replied. Sit down. Chidinma stood near the kitchen, trying not to smile too much. Every time her eyes met Ikenna's, she looked away shyly. The discussion began peacefully. Ikenna explained that he cared deeply for Chidinma and wanted to marry her. Mama Urena asked questions about his family and his intentions. He answered calmly. Nneka and Amarachi listened, but their interest was elsewhere. Eventually, Nneka leaned forward. Ikenna, Chidinma tells us you are a farmer. Ikenna nodded. Yes. How many farms do you own? There was a brief silence. Mama Urena gave Nneka a warning look, but Ikenna smiled. I work on a few pieces of land. A few? Nneka repeated. How many exactly? Ikenna chuckled softly. Enough to keep me busy. Amarachi exchanged a quick glance with Nneka. To them, the answer sounded like something a poor man would say because he did not want to admit how little he owned. Amarachi continued, And do you have a house of your own in Obodwani? Yes. A proper house? Chidinma immediately frowned. Amarachi, what? I am only asking. Ikenna remained calm. I have a home. How many rooms? Nneka asked. This time, Mama Urena interrupted. Are you marrying him? Nneka looked embarrassed. Mama, we are only trying to understand the kind of life our sister is entering. Ikenna did not appear offended. It is all right, Mama. They care about their sister. He turned toward Nneka and Amarachi. I cannot promise Chidinma that every day will be easy, but I can promise that I will work, I will respect her, and I will never make her regret trusting me. Chidinma's eyes became wet. It was not the answer her sisters wanted, but it was exactly the answer she needed. Mama Urena smiled deeply. Nneka remained doubtful. Later, when Ikenna and his relatives left, Nneka pulled Chidinma aside. You still have time to change your mind. I am not changing my mind. What exactly did he tell you he owns? Why does that matter so much to you? Chidinma asked. Because love will not fill a cooking pot, replied Nneka. Neither will pride, Chidinma answered. Nneka stared at her. Chidinma walked away before another argument could begin. The traditional marriage took place several months later, and Umuagu seemed to come alive with color. From early morning, women moved around Mama Urena's compound, preparing food, decorating the space, and arranging drinks. Different beautiful Ankara prints filled the compound. Some women wore red and yellow wrappers, others wore green and purple blouses, while younger women appeared in fitted Ankara gowns with bright patterns. Chidinma looked breathtaking in a rich red, emerald green, and gold outfit with coral beads around her neck and wrists. Her headscarf was carefully tied and her face glowed with happiness. When she stepped into the compound to dance before the guests, Mama Urena became emotional. She remembered holding Chidinma as a baby after her birth, and now she was watching her become a married woman. Ikenna's family came prepared with the required gifts, drinks, yams, and goats. The celebration was joyful, but Nneka and Amarachi still found things to criticize. They stood together near one side of the compound in their bright Ankara outfits. At my wedding, Chief Obina brought more drinks than this, Nneka whispered. Amarachi nodded. Echezona's people brought almost twice this number of guests. Chidinma happened to pass near them and heard part of the conversation. Her smile weakened for a moment, but she continued walking. Later, Mama Urena found her alone behind the house. What happened? She asked. Nothing, Mama. Do not lie to me. Chidinma sighed. They still think I have made a mistake. Mama Urena adjusted the coral beads around her daughter's neck. A marriage is not a competition between sisters. When all these people go home tonight, you are the one who will live with the man you chose. If you know his heart and you are at peace, then dance and enjoy your day. Chidinma smiled widely. I am at peace. Then that is enough. Chidinma returned to the celebration and refused to allow anyone's words to spoil her joy. After the marriage, the time finally came for her to follow Ikenna to Obodwani. Mama Urena hugged her tightly before she left. Nneka and Amarachi also hugged her, though both still wore worried expressions. If farm life becomes too difficult, remember you have sisters, Amarachi whispered. Chidinma laughed softly. I will remember. The journey to Obodwani was long and quiet. Chidinma sat beside Ikenna as they traveled along narrow village roads surrounded by thick vegetation. They crossed small streams and passed farms where men and women were working under the sun. Goat wandered close to some compounds. Children waved as they passed. Chidinma looked around with curiosity. Ikenna noticed. Are you frightened? He asked. No, you're very quiet. I'm looking at everything. Do you regret following me already? He teased. Chidinma turned toward him. Ask me again after 1 month. Ikenna laughed. When they finally arrived at his family compound, Chidinma looked around carefully. The part of the compound where they entered was spacious but modest. There was a neat cement house with a wide veranda, a small kitchen building, and several trees providing shade. It was not a mansion, but Chidinma did not feel disappointed. Ikenna looked at her as though waiting for a reaction. This is home for now, he said. For now? There are other parts of the property. You will see everything slowly. Chidinma nodded. This is already enough for me. Ikenna studied her face. You truly mean that? Why would I not? Because you had other men who could probably have shown you bigger things. Chidinma smiled gently. I did not marry a building. Something changed in Ikenna's expression. He reached for her hand. Then I pray I never make you regret choosing me. Her new life began quietly. Every morning, Ikenna woke before sunrise. Sometimes, Chidinma woke and found his side of the sleeping mat already empty. At first, she assumed he was going to one small family farm. But after a few weeks, she began noticing things that confused her. Workers came to the compound to report to him. Traders arrived asking when the next harvest would be ready. Men brought records of produce sold. One afternoon, Chidinma followed Ikenna to what she thought was his main farm. They walked for a long time before reaching a huge stretch of yam mounds. Chidinma stopped. Whose farm is this? Ikenna looked amused. Mine. She stared across the land. All of it? Yes. Ikenna. He laughed. What? You said you had a few pieces of land. I do. Your definition of a few is very different from mine. He laughed loudly. Chidinma tried not to smile. Why did you never tell me? Ikenna became serious. Because I wanted a wife, not someone interested in counting what I owned. Chidinma's smile slowly disappeared. He continued. I have met women before. Some became interested the moment they heard about the farms. With you, I saw something different. You thought I was simply a man carrying a hoe, yet you respected me. You never demanded anything. You never asked me to prove that I could take care of you. Chidinma looked down at the corn in her hands. I only wanted a good man. That is why I trusted you. She looked at him again. But I'm still angry. He laughed. Why? Because you enjoyed watching my face every time I discovered another farm. That part is true. Chidinma hit his arm lightly and both of them laughed. As the months passed, Chidinma became involved in the farming work. She did not simply sit inside the house waiting for Ikenna to return. She began keeping records of harvests. She wrote down what the traders bought and how much they paid. She noticed that some vegetables were being wasted because they were not stored properly and suggested that Ikenna improve their storage system. She helped organize the women who processed cassava and palm produce. Ikenna listened to her ideas and encouraged her. This is our work now, he told her, not mine alone. Those words meant a lot to Chidinma. Their marriage became stronger because she felt valued. They argued sometimes, as every couple did, but they did not insult each other. Ikenna listened when she was upset, and Chidinma learned when to advise him and when to simply support him. Whenever she returned to Umuagu to visit Mama Orena, she carried baskets of food from the farms. The first time, she brought several large yams, vegetables, palm oil, and smoked fish. Mama Orena was delighted. Nneka and Amarachi happened to be there. Chidinma wore a beautiful burgundy, green and yellow Ankara gown with simple flat sandals. Nneka looked at the sandals and laughed. Look at our farmer's wife. Amarachi joined her. It has started. Soon she will come here carrying a hoe. Chidinma smiled and continued arranging the food she brought for her mother. You are laughing, but you will still eat the yams, Mama Orena laughed. That is true. Nneka picked up one large tuber. This one is very big. Did Ikenna grow it? Yes. So he still goes to the farm himself almost every day. Nneka shook her head. I cannot imagine my husband spending every day inside mud. Chidinma looked at her, and I cannot imagine Ikenna sitting at home doing nothing. Amarachi waved her hand. Nobody said he should do nothing, but there are better businesses. Chidinma no longer argued. She had learned that trying to explain her life to her sisters only created unnecessary conflict. She was happy. Mama Orena could see that she was happy, and for Chidinma, that was enough. What she did not know was that the lives her sisters used to mock her with was slowly developing serious problems. Chifobina's business had begun to struggle. For years, he had spent money freely because he enjoyed being called a successful man. When his palm wine and produce business began making less profit, he refused to reduce his lifestyle. Instead, he borrowed. He borrowed to buy goods, he borrowed to attend ceremonies, he even borrowed money to purchase expensive items because he did not want Nneka to suspect anything. Whenever creditors came, he met them secretly. Nneka continued walking around proudly, believing everything was fine. In Amarachi's home, Echezona was also struggling. Some of the stalls at Nkwo Market that Amarachi told people belonged to her husband were actually rented. He owed suppliers money and had started borrowing to keep the business running. Amarachi noticed that he sometimes returned home worried, but whenever she asked what was wrong, he told her business was fine. Both women continued wearing their beautiful Ankara clothes and boasting whenever they visited their mother, because admitting that they had problems felt impossible. Almost 1 year after Chidinma's marriage, Mama Orena decided it was time to visit her youngest daughter's home properly. One afternoon, she told Nneka and Amarachi about her plan. I am going to Obodo Ani next week. Nneka looked surprised. For what? To visit your sister. You have never gone there? Amarachi asked. Not properly. I have seen the family compound during ceremonies, but I want to spend a few days with my daughter. Nneka shrugged. Enjoy yourself. Mama Orena looked directly at her. You are coming with me. Nneka almost dropped the cup in her hand. Me? You and Amarachi. Amarachi laughed nervously. Mama, what will all of us do there? Visit your sister. For how many days? 2 or 3? Nneka shook her head immediately. 3 days inside a farmer's compound? Mama Orena frowned. What is wrong with a farmer's compound? Nothing, but I like comfort. Then bring your comfort with you, Mama Orena replied. Amarachi started laughing. I will carry a sleeping mat. Carry 2, Nneka added, 1 for sleeping and 1 for sitting, because I do not know what kind of chairs they have. Both sisters laughed. Mama Orena stared at them. One day, your mouth will put you in trouble. Word reached Chidinma that her mother and sisters were coming, and she became excited. She told Ikenna immediately, Mama is finally coming to stay. Good, Ikenna said. Prepare whatever she likes. Nneka and Amarachi are coming too. Ikenna paused briefly, then smiled. They are welcome. Chidinma studied him suspiciously. Why are you smiling like that? Did I smile? Yes. Maybe I'm happy to see my sisters. Chidinma narrowed her eyes. I know you. Ikenna laughed and walked away. On the morning of the journey, Mama Orena wore a beautiful burgundy, mustard and cream Ankara blouse with a matching wrapper and headscarf. Nneka arrived wearing a blue, gold and white Ankara gown. Amarachi wore a purple, green and pink Ankara outfit with coral beads. Amarachi had packed far too much for a short visit. She carried extra wrappers, food, a folded sleeping mat and even a small mosquito net. Nneka looked at the luggage and burst out laughing. Are you relocating? I am preparing myself, Amarachi replied. I do not know what we will meet there. Mama Orena shook her head. You two will embarrass yourselves one day. They set out early while the morning air was still cool. The journey to Obodo Ani took them along red earth roads surrounded by palm trees and green vegetation. At first, Ikenna and Amarachi talked loudly, discussing people from the village and complaining about the dusty road. After some time, they entered a part of Obodoani where the farmland became much larger. The road passed beside an enormous yam farm filled with workers. Men moved between carefully prepared rows while others loaded harvested yams into large baskets. Ineka leaned toward the side and looked across the land. "This is a serious farm," she said. "Who owns all this?" The man guiding them turned slightly. "Ikenna Okafo." Ineka blinked. "Which Ikenna Okafo?" "Your sister's husband." Amarachi stopped adjusting her headscarf. "This entire yam farm belongs to him?" "Yes." The two sisters exchanged looks. Ineka quickly recovered. "Maybe this is the land he inherited from his father." Nobody answered. They continued moving. A little further down the road, another huge piece of land appeared, covered with cassava plants. Workers moved through the rows, cutting and gathering produce. Amarachi pointed. "That one is even bigger. Who owns it?" The guide answered without excitement, as though the information was ordinary. "Ikenna." Amarachi slowly lowered her hand. Ineka looked away. They traveled a little more and came across a maize farm stretching across both sides of the road. "Do not tell me," Ineka said quietly. "Ikenna," the guide replied. Mama Rena looked at her daughters and smiled but said nothing. A few minutes later came a large palm plantation. Tall palm trees stood in long rows and men were working beneath them. Amarachi's mouth opened slightly. "This too?" "Yes." "How much land does this man have?" she asked. The guide laughed and said, "You should ask him when you arrive." Ineka was no longer laughing. Her face had become serious. The story she had created in her head about Chidinma's poor farmer husband was slowly falling apart. They passed fish ponds surrounded by workers, then livestock areas and several storage buildings. Carts loaded with produce moved along smaller paths. Men greeted the guide as they passed. Amarachi kept looking from one side to the other. "Are you sure all these things belong to the same Ikenna?" she asked again. "How many Ikennas do you think married your sister?" Mama Rena replied, unable to hide her amusement. Amarachi became quiet. Ineka adjusted her gown and stared ahead. Finally, the narrow village road opened into a wider and cleaner path. Tall palm trees lined both sides. The path continued for some distance before an enormous carved gate appeared ahead of them. Ineka leaned forward. Amarachi did the same. The gate was far bigger than anything either of them expected to see near a simple farmer's home. Two workers standing near it quickly moved to open it. Ineka turned toward Mama Rena. "Mama, are we sure this is where Chidinma lives?" Mama Rena looked equally curious now. "We followed the direction she gave us." Amarachi held her bag tightly. "Maybe several families live inside." The gate opened wider. Their vehicle slowly moved forward. As they crossed into the compound, Ineka's eyes widened. Amarachi stopped breathing for a moment. Mama Rena leaned forward in surprise. Whatever stood ahead of them was clearly nothing like the small, uncomfortable farmer's home the two sisters had spent almost a year imagining. Ineka's proud smile disappeared completely as she stared ahead, unable to say another word, while the Amarachi sat frozen beside her with her mouth slightly open and the vehicle continued slowly through the enormous gate into Ikenna's compound. The vehicle continued slowly through the enormous gate, and for several seconds, Ineka and Amarachi could not say anything because what they were seeing did not match anything they had imagined about Chidinma's life. The wide path opened into a very large and beautiful compound with a clean central courtyard surrounded by carefully built houses. Directly ahead stood a magnificent two-story home with wide verandas, tall pillars and beautiful carved wooden doors. The walls were painted in warm, natural colors and the large windows were neatly covered with curtains that could be seen from outside. On one side of the compound stood two smaller guest houses, while another building farther behind looked like a large kitchen and food processing area. Beyond that were barns, storage houses, and neat spaces where farm tools were kept. Large yam barns stood under strong roofs at the back of the compound, and even from where the women were sitting, they could see rows of big tubers carefully arranged inside them. Fruit trees grew around the compound, flowers had been planted near the main house, and goats and sheep could be seen in a well-kept area farther away. Chickens moved around near one side of the courtyard, while workers carried baskets and tools from one part of the compound to another. Everything looked organized, peaceful, and prosperous. There was wealth everywhere, but it was not the kind of wealth that shouted for attention. Nothing had been arranged to impress visitors. It simply looked like the home of people who had worked hard for many years and had built something strong. Ikenna slowly turned her head from one side to the other. Her blue, gold, and white Ankara gown suddenly seemed less important to her as she stared at the size of the place. Amarachi held the edge of her purple, green, and pink wrapper tightly and leaned closer to Mama Rena. "Mama, I think we entered the wrong place." Mama Rena did not answer immediately because she was also looking around in amazement. Ikenna finally found her voice. "Yes, this cannot be Chidinma's house. Maybe this is the compound of the man Ikenna works for." Their guide, who had heard them, turned around and looked at the two women. "Nobody made a mistake," he said calmly. "This is Ikenna Okofor's home." Amarachi stared at him. "This entire place?" "Yes." Ikenna gave a short, nervous laugh. "Perhaps you mean his family lives here with many other people." The guide shook his head. "This is his home. His family has other property too, but this particular compound belongs to him." Ikenna's smile disappeared again. Before either sister could ask another question, the front door of the main house opened and Chidinma came outside. She wore a beautiful green, orange, and gold Ankara gown that fitted her neatly and flowed down below her knees. Her hair was beautifully braided and tied away from her face, and small coral earrings rested against her ears. She looked healthy, peaceful, and very happy. The moment she saw the vehicle, her face brightened. "Mama," she shouted happily as she hurried across the courtyard. Mama Rena held her tightly. "My daughter, I am here." Chidinma pulled back and looked at her mother with excitement. "I have been waiting since morning. I thought you people would arrive before now." "Your sisters delayed us with too many bags," Mama Rena said. Amarachi normally would have answered immediately, but she was still staring at the house. Chidinma turned toward Ikenna and Amarachi with his smile. "My sisters, welcome." Amarachi slowly stepped down from the vehicle. Ikenna followed. Chidinma went to hug Ikenna, but Ikenna barely moved her arms because her eyes remained fixed on the main house. Chidinma noticed and looked behind herself as though trying to understand what her sister was staring at. Ikenna asked Chidinma, "Are you all right?" Ikenna finally looked at her. "Chidinma, yes? Where exactly do you live here?" Chidinma frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Ikenna pointed toward the huge two-story house. "That house. Who owns it?" Chidinma followed her finger, then looked back at her sister. "My husband." Amarachi's eyes widened again. "You mean Ikenna?" Chidinma laughed. "How many husbands do I have?" Mama Rena immediately laughed, but Ikenna and Amarachi remained serious. Amarachi pointed toward the guest houses. "What about those ones? They are part of the compound. And the barns? Our barns. The other building behind there, that is where some of the food processing is done." Amarachi looked around once more. "All this belongs to Ikenna?" "Yes." Chidinma stared at both sisters for a moment and then understood what was happening. A small smile formed on her lips. "Why are you looking like people who have seen something frightening?" Ikenna swallowed. "You never told us." "Told you what? That you live like this?" Chidinma smiled again. But before she could answer, a familiar male voice came from the far side of the courtyard. "So my visitors have finally arrived." The women turned. Ikenna was walking toward them. He wore a simple brown traditional shirt, a dark wrapper tied around his waist, and leather sandals. There was a little dry soil on the lower part of his legs, and a hole rested casually across one shoulder. He looked almost exactly like the same farmer Ikenna and Amarachi had mocked many times. That made the sight even harder for them to understand. Ikenna stared at the hole. Then she stared at the mansion. Then she looked back at Ikenna. Amarachi did the same. Ikenna smiled warmly as he reached them. He lowered the hoe to the ground and greeted Mama Rena first. "Mama, welcome. I am very happy you came." Mama Rena smiled. "Thank you, my son. Your home is beautiful." "Thank you, Mama." He turned toward Ikenna and Amarachi. "My sisters, you're welcome too." Amarachi managed to answer, "Thank you." Ikenna nodded slowly. "Thank you." There was no mockery in Ikenna's expression. There was no pride either. He behaved exactly how he had behaved the first time he visited Mama Rena's compound. He called 2 workers and asked them to help bring the women's bags inside. When one worker lifted Amarachi's folded sleeping mat, Ikenna's face became hot. Chidinma quickly covered her mouth to hide a laugh. Nneka looked away. Amarachi forced a smile. I like traveling prepared. Ikenna nodded innocently. That is good, but I think the bed in your room should be comfortable. Chidinma could no longer hold herself. She laughed loudly. Mama Rena joined her. Amarachi gave a warning look to Chidinma, but there was no real anger behind it because embarrassment had already taken over. Come inside, Chidinma said. You all must be tired. As they walked toward the house, Nneka noticed workers greeting Ikenna respectfully. Some called him from a distance to ask about work, and he answered each person calmly. A man carrying a small notebook approached him. The traders from the western villages have arrived for the maize, he said. Ikenna nodded. Let them weigh everything properly. Do not rush. I will come after I settle my visitors. The man thanked him and walked away. Amarachi looked at Nneka, but neither sister said anything. When they entered the main house, their shock deepened. The sitting room was large and beautifully arranged, with strong carved wooden chairs covered with soft cushions. Traditional artwork decorated the walls, but the room also had modern furniture, large windows, and a clean, polished floor. There were woven baskets used as decoration, carefully placed flowers, and a long dining table in another section of the room. Everything looked expensive, but nothing looked wasteful. Mama Rena slowly touched the arm of one of the chairs. Chidinma, this is a beautiful home. Chidinma smiled. Thank you, Mama. She led her mother upstairs and showed her a large guest room with a comfortable bed, clean curtains, a dressing table, and an attached washroom. Mama Rena looked around and laughed softly. So, this is where my daughter has been suffering? Chidinma immediately laughed. Please, do not start, Mama. Nneka heard the comment from the doorway and lowered her eyes. Amarachi stood behind her, holding the small bag she had refused to give a worker because she suddenly felt foolish about everything she had packed. Chidinma showed them their rooms as well. Nneka's room had a large bed covered with clean sheets, 2 wooden chairs, a small table, and beautiful patterned curtains. Amarachi's room was similar. Amarachi slowly placed her sleeping mat against the wall. Chidinma leaned against the door. Should I ask somebody to spread the mat for you? Amarachi turned quickly. Do not annoy me. Chidinma burst into laughter. You brought it because you thought I did not have beds. I said I like being prepared. Prepared for what? Sleeping beside the goats? Chidinma, Amarachi shouted. But even she finally began laughing because there was no good excuse left. Later in the evening, Chidinma prepared a large dinner with the help of 2 women who worked around the compound. The family sat together at the long dining table. There was yam, vegetable soup, roasted fish, fresh vegetables, and other food from the farm. Ikenna sat beside Chidinma while Mama Orena sat across from them. Nneka and Amarachi sat quietly, still trying to understand everything they had seen. The peaceful meal was interrupted several times because workers and traders came to speak with Ikenna. One man entered respectfully and stood near the doorway. The people buying the cassava have finished loading, but they want to know if another 20 baskets can be ready tomorrow. Ikenna thought for a moment. Do not take from the section we are keeping for processing. Tell them we can give them 12 baskets tomorrow and the rest in 3 days. The man nodded. All right. Another man came later to report about fish being moved from one pond. A third person brought records for maize that had been sold. Ikenna looked through the figures and asked questions before signing the paper. Nneka watched everything carefully. Finally, she could not remain silent. Ikenna, how many farms do you actually have? Ikenna smiled without looking surprised by the question. I have several. Several where? Amarachi asked. Here in Obodoani and in some neighboring communities. How many workers? It depends on the season. During planting and harvest, there are many more. Some work with us all year. Nneka leaned back. And you sell all these things to traders? Yes, some traders come here. Some produce goes directly to markets. We also supply people who process palm produce and cassava. Amarachi looked at Chidinma. And you knew all this? Chidinma smiled. Of course. Since when? Since after I married him and started working with him. Nneka's face changed slightly when she heard that. You work here too? Yes. I keep some records, help organize sales, and supervise some of the women working in the processing area. Ikenna looked at Chidinma proudly. She has improved many things since she came. We waste less produce now because of the way she organized storage. Mama Orena looked at her daughter with pride. You did not tell me. Chidinma shrugged. There was no reason to make noise about it. Nneka lowered her eyes. That sentence touched her in a way Chidinma did not intend. Making noise about things was exactly what Nneka had always done. After dinner, everyone rested. Later that night, Nneka went to Chidinma's room. Chidinma was folding one of her Ankara wrappers and placing it inside a wooden wardrobe when she heard a knock. "Come in." Nneka entered and closed the door behind her. She stood quietly for a moment. Chidinma looked at her. "What is wrong?" Nneka crossed her arms. "Why did you never tell us?" "About what?" "Please stop pretending you do not understand." "I truly want to know what you mean." Nneka pointed around the room and then toward the window as though the entire compound was outside her hand. "All this, the farms, the house, the workers, everything." Chidinma looked at her quietly. "What exactly was I supposed to tell you?" "That Ikenna was wealthy." Chidinma's expression became serious. "Would it have changed the way you treated him?" Nneka opened her mouth but did not answer. Chidinma placed the wrapper on the bed. "When I told you I loved him, you laughed because he was a farmer. When he came to our mother's house, you asked him how many rooms he had. When I came home with food, you laughed at my sandals and asked whether my husband still carried a hoe. Did you ever ask if I was happy?" Nneka looked away. "That is not the point. It is exactly the point." Chidinma's voice remained calm, but there was hurt beneath it. "You never asked how he treated me. You never asked whether he respected me. You never asked what we were building together. You only wanted to know whether he looked rich enough for you to respect him." Nneka's face became uncomfortable. "We were worried about you." "No, Mama was worried about me. She asked if I was happy. You were embarrassed by me." Nneka remained silent. Chidinma softened her voice. "I did not hide anything from you. I simply stopped explaining myself because every time I spoke, you had already decided what my life looked like." Nneka slowly sat on the edge of the bed. For the first time since arriving, there was no pride in her face. "I thought you were struggling." "And if I was?" Chidinma asked. Nneka looked up. Chidinma continued. "If this house was small, would Ikenna suddenly become a bad husband?" Nneka had no answer. "That is why I never needed to announce what he owned," Chidinma said. "The reason I married him has not changed because you have now seen a big house." Nneka looked down at her hands. She wanted to apologize, but her pride was still fighting inside her. After a long silence, she simply said, "Good night." Chidinma nodded. "Good night." The following morning, Ikenna invited the family to visit some of the farms. Mama Orena was excited. Nneka and Amarachi also agreed, though neither sister was as loud as she had been the previous day. The women changed into comfortable, colorful Ankara outfits. Mama Orena wore a green and yellow blouse with a brown wrapper. Nneka chose a red and blue Ankara gown, while Amarachi wore a bright yellow and purple blouse with a matching wrapper. Chidinma wore a teal and orange gown with flat sandals. They traveled first to the yam farm they had seen on their way in. This time, they entered deeper into the land. Hundreds of yam mounds stood in careful rows. Workers were harvesting from one section, while other people tied yams together for transport. Ikenna greeted almost every worker by name. "How is your son?" he asked one older man. "He is better now. Thank you for sending the money for his medicine." Nneka looked at Ikenna, but he simply nodded and continued walking. At another part of the farm, a young man approached him with a wide smile. "The seedlings you gave me are doing well." "Good," Ikenna said. "Do not sell everything after harvest. Keep enough for the next planting." "I will." They later visited a section of land where several widows were working. One elderly woman greeted Ikenna warmly. Mama Orena asked Chidinma who they were. Chidinma explained that Ikenna allowed some widows to farm on part of his land without paying rent until they became strong enough to manage their own land. Mama Orena turned toward Ikenna. "You do all this?" Ikenna looked uncomfortable with the praise. "They work for themselves, Mama. I only give them space." Mama Orena smiled. "A person who gives somebody space to stand has already helped." Nneka and Amarachi said nothing. By the time they visited the cassava section, the fish ponds, and one of the storage areas, both sisters were exhausted, but their minds were even more tired than their bodies. Every new thing they saw destroyed another part of the picture they had created about Ikenna. They had imagined poverty because his hands were rough. They had imagined failure because he carried a hoe. They had imagined that a quiet man must have nothing. By afternoon, they returned to the compound. Chidinma and Mama Orena rested on the veranda while Nneka and Amarachi sat nearby. Ikenna had just gone to change his clothes when a man entered through the gate. Nneka looked up casually and then suddenly stood. "Obina?" Chief Obina stopped walking. His face changed the moment he saw his wife. He wore a cream traditional outfit and carried a leather bag. "Nneka?" She stared at him. "What are you doing here?" Chief Obina looked toward Mama Orena and greeted her first, but Nneka was too confused to wait. "I asked you a question. Why are you here?" "I came to see someone." "Who?" Before he could answer, Ikenna came out of the house. He had changed into a clean dark green traditional shirt and plain trousers. When Chief Obinna saw him, he immediately stepped forward. "Mr. Ikenna, good afternoon." Nneka felt something twist inside her stomach. Ikenna smiled and shook his hand. "Chief Obinna, welcome. I did not know you were coming today. I was nearby, so I decided to stop." Nneka looked from one man to the other. "You know each other?" Chief Obinna looked uncomfortable. Ikenna answered honestly. "We have spoken twice." "He wants to discuss business." Nneka's face became serious. "What business?" Chief Obinna sighed. "Nneka, we will talk later." "No, we will talk now." Mama Rena immediately spoke. "Nneka, calm down." But Nneka could already sense that something was wrong. "For months you have told me everything is fine. What business are you discussing with Ikenna?" Chief Obinna looked embarrassed. Ikenna recognized that it was not his place to speak and stepped aside. Chief Obinna finally sat down heavily. "My business has been having problems." Nneka froze. "What problems?" "Sales reduced. I lost money on some produce. I borrowed money to keep things moving." "Borrowed from who?" "Different people." Her voice rose. "How much?" "Nneka, how much?" Chief Obinna looked at her. "Enough to cause trouble if I do not settle it soon." Nneka slowly sank back into her chair. Amarachi stared at her brother-in-law in shock. Chief Obinna continued. "I have been trying to get a steady supply arrangement with Ikenna because his farms produce enough for me to rebuild part of the business. If I can buy directly from him under an agreement, I can reduce what I spend buying through other middlemen." Nneka felt as if somebody had poured cold water over her. Her eyes moved toward Ikenna. The same man she had laughed at for being a farmer was now the man her husband had traveled to meet for help. "How long has this been happening?" she whispered. Chief Obinna looked down. "More than a year." "A year?" Tears immediately filled her eyes. "And you never told me?" "I tried." "No, you did not. Every time I wanted to tell you, you were talking about what people would say if we stopped living the way we were living. You wanted me to attend every ceremony. You wanted new clothes. You wanted people to believe I was doing better than everyone." Nneka stood up angrily. "So this is my fault?" "I did not say that." "You are saying it without saying it." Chief Obinna shook his head. "I made my own mistakes. I should have told you the truth. I should never have borrowed money just to keep an image. But I was afraid of disappointing you." Nneka began crying. Mama Arena stood and took her arm, but Nneka pulled away gently. "The things you bought for me?" she asked. Chief Obinna looked ashamed. "Some were bought on credit." Nneka covered her mouth. Every proud story she had told her sisters came rushing back to her. Every time she had used Chief Obinna's money to make Chidinma feel small, suddenly felt foolish. She turned and walked quickly toward the guest house because she could not bear to stand there any longer. Chidinma followed her. Inside the room, Nneka sat on the bed and cried. Chidinma sat beside her but did not speak immediately. "Do not say anything," Nneka whispered. "I am not going to mock you," Chidinma replied. Nneka looked at her sister through tears. "I would have mocked you." Chidinma remained silent. "If this happened to you, I would have used it to prove that I was right. Yet you are sitting here with me." Chidinma reached for her hand. "You are my sister before anything else." Nneka cried harder. Outside, Ikenna spoke privately with Chief Obinna. He did not promise money. Instead, he asked about debts, suppliers, customers, and the exact reason the business was failing. "If I help you with produce while the same problems remain, you will still fail," Ikenna explained. "Bring your records tomorrow, we will look at them." Chief Obinna nodded gratefully. "Thank you." "Do not thank me yet. We first have to know whether the business can be repaired." The family had barely recovered from Nneka's shock when another trader arrived later that afternoon. He was an older man from Ukwo Market who had come to discuss buying palm produce from Ikenna. Amarachi recognized him. "Uncle Chuma," she said warmly. The man smiled. "Amarachi, what are you doing here?" "My sister is married here." "Which sister?" Amarachi pointed toward Chidinma. The man looked surprised. "So Ikenna is your brother-in-law? You people are fortunate." Amarachi forced a small smile. As they talked, she mentioned the Chizona and proudly said, "You know my husband is expanding his shops too." The trader's expression changed. "Expanding?" Amarachi noticed immediately. "Yes? Why are you looking like that?" "Nothing. You know Ichizona well. Is something wrong?" The man hesitated. "It is not my place." Amarachi's stomach tightened. "Please speak." The trader looked toward Ikenna, then back at her. "Your husband owes several suppliers at Nkwa Market. Some people have been patient because they know his family." Amarachi stared at him. "That is not possible." "I wish I was lying. He owns several shops." The man sighed. "He rents most of those stalls. He owns only one small one. Business has been difficult for him." Amarachi's face went pale. "No. Talk to your husband. Do not take my word alone. Ask him." Amarachi turned and walked away without another word. She entered her room and closed the door. A few minutes later, Chidinma found her sitting on the bed with both hands covering her face. "Amarachi, please leave me." Chidinma sat beside her anyway. Amarachi lifted her head slowly. "Was everyone lying to us, or were we lying to ourselves?" Chidinma said nothing. Amarachi began to cry. "I have been telling people my husband owns half the market. Maybe he was ashamed to tell you the truth, and I made it worse." She wiped her tears. "I kept demanding things because I wanted Neka to see that my husband was doing well. Neka bought something, I wanted something better. She talked about Chief Obina, I talked about Ichizona. We turned our marriages into a competition." Chidinma put an arm around her shoulder. "You can still change that." Amarachi leaned against her and cried quietly. That night, the family gathered in the courtyard after dinner. The compound was peaceful. Lanterns and electric lights from the veranda gave the courtyard a warm glow. Ineka wore a simple blue and red Ankara blouse with a wrapper. Amarachi wore a yellow and purple Ankara gown without the jewelry she had worn earlier. For once, neither woman cared about how she looked. Chief Obina had gone to sleep in one of the guest rooms after speaking with Ineka privately. Amarachi had sent a message to Echezona telling him they would speak when she returned. Mama Orena sat in the middle of her daughters and looked at them for a long time. "Today has taught all of you something," she finally said. Ineka lowered her head. Amarachi stared at the ground. Mama Orena continued, "I warned both of you many times. You laughed at Chidinma because her husband carried a hoe. You looked at the soil on his feet and decided he was poor. You looked at his simple clothes and decided he was not successful. But look around you now." Ineka's eyes became wet again. "Mama, please." "No, you need to hear it. I am not saying this to shame you. I am saying it because if you do not understand what happened, you will repeat the same mistake with somebody else." Amarachi nodded slowly. Mama Orena pointed toward the farm road beyond the compound. "That man wakes before the sun and works. He gives people jobs, he helps widows, he gives young men a place to begin their own farms. He feeds many families through the work of his hands. Yet, because he did not wear expensive clothes, you thought he was beneath you." Ineka wiped a tear from her cheek. "I was wrong." Mama Rena looked at her. "Why were you wrong?" Ineka took a long breath. "Because I thought success had to look a certain way. I thought if people could not see money on a person, the person had nothing." Amarachi added quietly, "And I thought marrying well meant marrying a man other women would envy." Chidinma looked at her sisters. There was no joy in seeing them humbled. Instead, she felt sad that it had taken pain for them to understand. "I never wanted any of this to happen to you," she said. Neka looked at her. "I know. I never wanted to prove that my husband was better than yours. I know that now." Neka reached across and held Chidema's hand. "I am sorry. Not because I have seen this house, not because of the farms. I am sorry because I treated you as if you were foolish for choosing your own happiness. I acted as if I knew what was best for you simply because I liked showing people what my own husband could buy." Amarachi moved closer too. "I am sorry as well. I laughed at Ikenna. I laughed at you. I even brought a sleeping mat because I thought your house would be too poor for me." Chidinma laughed softly through the emotion. "That sleeping mat will follow you home tomorrow." Amarachi laughed and wiped her tears. "I will never hear the end of that mat." Mama Rena finally smiled. Good. Maybe it will remind you to keep your mouth under control. Everyone laughed quietly, and for the first time since arriving, the tension began to leave the courtyard. The next morning, Neka and Amarachi asked to speak with Ikenna. They found him outside near one of the barns checking some yams with a worker. When he finished, he walked toward them. Is everything all right? He asked. Neka looked nervous. We came to apologize. Ikenna was silent. Amarachi spoke first. We treated you badly from the beginning. We judged you without knowing you. Neka added, I mocked you because you were a farmer. I thought my husband was better than you because he dressed well and spent money publicly. I was wrong. Ikenna listened carefully. Then he asked one question. Why are you apologizing now? The sisters looked at each other. He continued, Is it because you have seen my house? Neither answered. If you had arrived yesterday and found me living in a small mud house, would you still believe I deserved respect? Neka looked down. That is the part I am ashamed of. Ikenna nodded slowly. Then that is the part you should change. This house can disappear. Farms can fail. Money can come and go. If tomorrow I lose everything, I will still be the same man who came to your mother's compound and asked to marry Chidinma. My character will not change because the size of my house changes. Amarachi's eyes filled with tears again. We understand. I hope you do, he said gently. Respect poor people too. Respect farmers who own only one small piece of land. Respect traders who have only one table in the market. A person does not need to become wealthy before people stop insulting them. Neka nodded. You are right. Ikenna smiled. Then we are fine. He opened his arms slightly and both women hugged him one after the other. From the veranda, Chidinma watched with tears in her eyes. She turned toward Mama Orina. Mama, I think they have finally changed. Mama Orina smiled. Time will show us. Chief Obinna brought his business records later that morning, and Ikenna spent several hours studying them. He discovered that the business could still survive, but Chief Obinna had to reduce unnecessary spending and stop borrowing to maintain appearances. I can give you a limited supply arrangement, he explained. You will buy certain produce directly from us at an agreed price, but you must pay as agreed. No excuses because we are family. Chief Obinna nodded. I understand. And stop trying to look rich. Build your business again. Chief Obinna laughed sadly. I have learnt that lesson. Neka, who was sitting nearby, said quietly, Both of us have. Ikenna smiled. Over the next few months, Chief Obinna slowly followed the plan. Neka changed too. She stopped demanding new things simply because another woman had them. She helped her husband keep proper records and even sold some expensive items they no longer needed so they could pay part of their debts. It was not easy, but for the first time their marriage became more honest. Amarachi returned home and confronted Echezona. At first, he denied everything, but when she told him what the trader had revealed, he finally confessed. He admitted that most of the stores were rented and that he had hidden his debts because he was ashamed. Amarachi was angry, but she also admitted that her constant competition with Neka had created pressure in their home. She told Echezona she was willing to rebuild with him only if there would be no more lies. He agreed. Several months later, the family gathered again at Mama Urina's compound for a celebration. The same mango tree stood over the courtyard, but the atmosphere among the sisters had changed completely. Neka arrived wearing a beautiful blue and red Ankara wrapper and blouse. She looked elegant, but this time she did not begin the visit by talking about what her husband had bought. Instead, she carried a basket of food and helped Mama Urina arrange chairs. Amarachi arrived wearing a yellow and purple Ankara gown and immediately joined Chidinma in the kitchen. There was no argument about whose clothes were better. No one asked whose husband had more money. Later, Chidinma arrived with Ikenna. She wore a stunning emerald green, burgundy and gold Ankara outfit, while Ikenna wore a simple cream traditional shirt and dark trousers. After greeting everyone, Ikenna noticed that one of the workers who had come with him needed help moving some farm tools from their vehicle. He went outside and returned carrying his familiar hoe across one shoulder. Neka saw him and suddenly called out, Ikenna! He stopped. Yes? She stood with both hands on her waist and looked very serious. I have been thinking. Everyone turned toward her. About what? Ikenna asked. Do you still have one small piece of land somewhere? Ikenna frowned. Why? She lifted her chin proudly. I think I also want to become a farmer. For 1 second, there was silence. Then Amarachi screamed with laughter. Chidinma bent forward laughing. Mama Urena slapped her thigh and laughed until tears filled her eyes. Even Chief Obina could not control himself. Ikenna rested the hoe against the wall and looked at Nneka. Are you sure? Farming means soil on your feet. Nneka laughed. I have learned that soil on the feet can be better than dirt around the neck. Everyone laughed even harder. Amarachi pointed at her. Start with the sleeping mat you mocked me for carrying. Take it to the farm and rest there. Please, leave that mat alone, Amarachi shouted. The compound filled with laughter, and for the first time, the sisters could joke about the past without pain. Chidinma stood beside Ikenna and watched her family with a peaceful smile. The same sisters who had once looked down on her now respected the life she had chosen. But she was happiest because they had learned something greater than the truth about Ikenna's wealth. They had discovered that while they had been busy judging people by what could be seen from outside, Chidinma had quietly chosen a man who loved her, respected her, and built a future with her. The beautiful house had shocked them. The endless farms had humbled them, and the truth about their own husbands had forced them to face their pride. But the greatest lesson remained with them long after the visit ended. A person's worth should never be measured by dirty hands, simple clothes, or humble work, because true wealth does not always make noise, and hard work can create great success, and a person's good character, honesty, respect, and determination are far more important than the image they show to the world.